Greetings, one and all. Hey, hey, hey. How you doing this morning? Hope you're all doing well. It's Friday. It's Friday. How did we get to Friday? How did we get to the last Friday of September of 2020? It seems like the entire year has just blown by. Um, just waiting on CouchBot to fire. CouchBot is our friendly helper that notifies the Discord community that we are live as we do this Monday through Friday. Got some work in here this morning. Been going back and forth with Lisa. She's working on some proprietary work. So obviously that doesn't make it into the feedback loop. But she's had some questions this morning about best practices around things like disabling a back button. And there's a lot of things that will get you into the realm of anti-patterns. One of those is in an anti-pattern basically is the internet operates in a particular way that everybody understands, and then you somehow mess with that. Okay? And one of the most common anti-patterns that you'll see is when somebody takes over the mouse and makes it and messes with the scrolling. So instead of going up and down, suddenly it scrolls left to right, or right to left. And that's always disorienting for the user because it doesn't match up with what they're actually doing. And I want to preface that is different than pinch and zoom, where you pinch and zoom in and out of a map or a photo. Pinch and zoom is a known pattern. We understand what this does. But when you make it to where, for instance, if you change the scroll, if you change the zoom, instead of pinch and zoom to be I'm going to scroll my finger up and down, well, I expect to go up and down the page, but you've created an anti-pattern because you've done something different with that action. The back button, which Lisa was talking about, is much the same. If you disable the back button, or if you make the back button or any button do something different on your website than it does on the other websites, that is breaking the pattern, the expected pattern of functionality for that element. So in this case, the question is, can we get rid of the back button? And there are times where the back button should be shut down. Okay, a case in point is my daughter's in school right now. If she were to take a test and she gets a question wrong, you shouldn't be able to hit the back button to go change the answer. Okay, so I want to make it perfectly clear that there are instances where breaking that pattern makes a lot of sense. For instance, with test taking. But if you don't have a situation where it benefits, or if you don't have a situation where the pattern change is clearly beneficial to the user or the function, then I would say you've got to leave it alone. Okay, so know that there is that caveat, there is that opportunity. We're not in the camp of never. We're definitely not saying that you should never disable those things, but it should be like an extremely high bar before you do. And almost never should you take over the scroll. It just like it's not a great what is the phrase that I'm looking for? It's not a great experience. There you go. It's experience. We're talking about a user experience. The good news here is that it appears that CouchBot has fired. It's interesting. CouchBot's fired, but it looks. Oh, it came up. Okay. The preview image wasn't coming up. It was. I was saddened for a moment. Anyway, let's get this underway because I want to get into the work that Katie has submitted. So, Lisa, thank you for submitting all of that this morning. It kind of spurred the conversation there a bit, but let's get underway. Greetings, one and all. Chris Courtney here, new Pragmatic. It's time for the feedback loop. If you're catching the edited version later, know that we had a little discussion of anti-patterns, or anti-patterns. Anti-patterns is how I typically say it. We had a discussion of anti-patterns and talked about scrolling and hijacking the scroll and disabling of buttons and activities that just are typically frowned upon. Kudos to Lisa for bringing those questions up this morning. But for the rest of you who are here in the edited edition of Feedback Loop, we're going to be looking at Katie's latest work on Fresh Market. She's working through the project. She's trying to get some momentum. I can tell that she's really putting an effort and trying to get through these cycles. So let's see if we can help her level up. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. Okay, so Katie is here, and right away I recognize this from her post. She's talking about not being unsure of why this is occurring. So I definitely want to go in here and take a look at that. I also want to take a look at her. So it says not sure why, and 2, getting that to show up in the cream color. So that is literally this part right there she's struggling with. Still trying to decide on the type size to use in the checkout process. 18 might be too big, and utilizing more tools for alignment. So she's definitely pushing this forward, trying to get this in a better spot. I can tell that she clearly worked through this, and this was a big series of alignment adjustments, and it just looks much cleaner today, Katie. So thank you for going through and working on these other elements. You can kind of see, like, now this turkey bacon club, this last one, there's no like adjustments that have been added here inside. So it's like very very clear, like, what the boundaries are for that, even though there's no particular spacing that's been added. I would say that down here, if you're looking at if you're trying to line this up, it seems like that checkout would still need to come in. So there's that issue. I'm going to pause for a second because it seems like there's something going on in the background. I'll have to edit this out later. It appears that has passed. I'm not completely certain what that was about. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take a look at this shape, because I am curious of how this group here is built. And it looks like, Katie, the problem that you've got here is when you've got your rectangle, which currently has no fill on it, and it is on top of the text. All right. So to fix this, we actually, the good news here is you've got this inside of a component. All right. So kudos for this, because this makes it a lot easier to fix. Let's find that component. I'm certain that it is here. Probably in sections, maybe. No. Other. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So take me over to that thing. Oh, okay. So it's up here. So there's a couple of different ways that we can go about fixing this. I want to go into the layers here. One is just simply, we're here and we're looking at the actual component, just switching it. Okay. And in each of these instances, I want to switch this around so that it's in a situation where, yeah, okay, so it's weird. It's funny, in 46 here, you had it in the right order, but it flipped on all the others. But now if we were to go through and add a background color to, say, this rectangle and put a fill on it of gray, it's going to show up fine. There's another, so that's one piece of it that I think is helpful. What I want to do is I want to come through and adjust this a bit, though, because I want to give us some space. Because what I would prefer to do, to keep you from having to replicate that change over and over again is I would like to, so this is cart pagination. So right here, this is cart pagination cart. This is cart pagination. Oh, well, let's get rid of that. Delete. I'm going to detach the instance because I'm going to end up making a component out of this in just a second. And I'm sure that you've got this. Yeah, it's right there. So there's that. That's good. Now let's switch this cart around. And here with the cart, I believe we need to get rid of that. And then we're going to get rid of the fill. So this is now focused on delivery, right? All we would need to do now is, this is named cart, so let's change the name to delivery. And now let's come through and let's go ahead and create component. And now we've got cart pagination delivery. What this would allow us to do over here on post UI is instead of having to worry about the switch that's happened here, we could simply just say, oh yeah, well I want to, let's actually, let's just switch here, let's swap instance, and we're going to come down to cart pagination delivery. And now it's just set up so if I ended up swapping that out again to cart, well, actually let's reset reset all overrides. All right. So now we've reset that. That's on pagination cart. Now if we switch it to pagination delivery, instead of you having to come in and mess around each time you want to have this second area filled, you have it as a component. And I would do that for each of these steps, so that it is just as simple as selecting the item and then changing and swapping out the instance over here, rather than having to dig in and like click through and change that color down here. It's just, I find it to be easier to just modify all of that over here. And again, to do it, I would start by detaching this instance, because I don't want this to appear as an instance of one of these other things, because then when I update the other thing, it's an issue. But then I would come through again. Let's change that fill. Let's change the fill here on that. Let's come into, it's 48 here. Let's come into payment. Let's change that fill. Let's come into rectangle. Let's get your, oh no, sorry, I added a stroke. That wasn't ideal. Let's do the fill there. And now this obviously would not be cart pagination delivery. It's payment. And then we come through and go ahead, and you could do this a couple of ways actually. You could come up and just say component right here, and that would do it. Or you could do it the way I did it last time, and simply coming down, and well, you've got to have something selected that needs to be a component, but you could select it from the drop down, and it typically is like somewhere through here. But being that it's already a component, it's not going to allow me to create a component out of it again. And then as we're coming back through, in this particular instance, if I had this selected and I said, oh yeah, I want that, this is for the payment page, you can just slide it over. So that's how I would handle it. You're going to need one for review as well. That brings me to another question with regard to how these shadows, it's kind of interesting. It's like they have a slightly different shadow on each one, and I'm curious. This is something called delivery box. So I want to go over here and look at your components and see if we can find delivery box. Yeah, delivery box appears to be down here. And I just want to, I'm not a huge fan of shadows, but when they're going to be used, I just want them to be like really good. And I want to see how you're making this shadow, because it seems like there's like a clear difference between here and here. So let's see what's going on. Is this delivery box? That is delivery box. Okay. Let's pay attention to how this is being constructed. Okay, so interesting. So you're actually constructing this the way that I would want it to be constructed, in that you're putting the shadow on the bigger box. It's not. I was worried that the shadow was actually on the box, this blue box, but it's not. It's not built that way. So that's how I would encourage you to construct it. I think this is just an optical illusion. It's an optical illusion that it basically makes. It's because this area over here is darker. Because this area is darker than the tan that you have here, it makes it look like this is a poorly structured shadow, which in fact the shadow that you've created is fine. It's just an optical illusion. I bet you if I changed this and said, oh, okay, this is white, yeah, now the shadow appears to be substantially stronger. There is no movement there. So you actually created an optical illusion by having that dark bar there. That's so interesting. It's always surprising when little things like that will pop up in designs. So well, that's cool. I wasn't expecting that to be an optical illusion. So I've learned something this morning. Let's continue looking on here. There's a few things that I want you to pay close attention to. Inside of these structures, so like you've got this delivery box, these should be consistent, okay? There's no way that this structure here for your cart should be any different in interior sizing than this structure that you've got for delivery. So, that means that all of the images that are in here should be coming over, because this design needs to match that design, and all of these designs should have the same spacing. Okay, just because one design is narrower doesn't mean that it shouldn't the spacing of these boxes shouldn't match all the way through. So that's one thing I would encourage you to take a closer look at. Additionally, you had I'll undo that for right now. Additionally, you had questions about type size, and I think that this might be 18. I'm going to detach this really fast. No, that's 24. This is body copy, and body copy here is 18. Okay, so I think this is probably the area where you're focused on whether it's too big or not. And here's where I think a bit of research is always beneficial. I have pulled up Grubhub as an example of a site that also does food ordering. And I always look at the competitors of the space that I'm in to see, okay, am I more or less in the same field with the competitors around me? And I actually I've ordered Vindaloo here from Elephant and Castle. I'm not really going to order this, but I wanted to get something in here to allow us to look at the sizing that's used for the checkout page on Grubhub. I'm going to inspect element on this, and how I do this is I control click with the element. I'm just wanting to know, okay, how big is Vindaloo as it's written here. I'm going to inspect element, and that's going to pull it over, and this gets us back into the cart, and I'll look at Vindaloo again, and here's Vindaloo, and it's this anchor tag, so I can go back and look at the Vindaloo, but let's see how big it is. And that Vindaloo has a font size that's being inherited, and it's inheriting that from the body. So this seems to be like whatever the, okay, and there when I turned it off, it shows me what size it is. It is 14 pixels, and it is in a font family called Graphique. Graphique, because it's goth. It's got a K. So if I turn that off, you can see Graphique is right there. 14 pixels is the size of Vindaloo. Interesting enough, if you inspect element on the your order from, and you turn font size is actually a little bigger, for 15.4 pixels. And if you go up here to invite friends and order together and inspect that, that is at 12 pixels. All this information is really relatively small. If we come out and we say, okay, well, let's look at this in terms of, what is it like on a desktop? I'm going to switch the information around here. Yes, we'll put this to the bottom so that we now have our order to the side. I'm just curious if they're changing the size of this at all for mobile, and it turns out that they are not. So regardless if it's on desktop or mobile, for Grubhub, this is 14 pixels. So 14 pixels, it's just ever so slightly larger for this label. If you're wondering about this text, this is the largest text on the screen. Okay, let's inspect element on that. It says you've entered a new address, and that is 30. So the largest text on the screen is 30 on Grubhub. I want to go back now and look at the design here. So I'm curious about this label for the restaurant name. If I had to imagine, that looks to be about what it was on the other page. On the last page we looked at, I'm going to guess this is 30, and it is 30.8 pixels. All right. If we look down here on the address is in here. I bet it's at 14. And the answer is correct. It is at 14. So the base body size for fonts on Grubhub is 14. If you look at this, it says 333 ratings. How big is that? I bet it's like 10 or 12. And it is super small, whatever it is. It's 12. And if I change that to 14, it's going to be really apparent right away. And you can see what's being used up here in the search bar and down here. The same style was being used in two different places. But overall, the typography here is really constrained. I know over on all of this is all probably at 18, and that's not to say that it's bad. It's just really large for the checkout process. Okay, but it's also fairly legible. If I was looking for any upside to having it at 18, I would say that it's fairly legible. But does it have to be 18? No. This would be on the larger side for checkout flows. But look at all the space that you've got here. It really feels like you are purposely like spacing things out because you're trying to get things to line up when they don't necessarily have to. And I'm looking at, okay, so this is cart checkout summary. You've created a component out of that, so that's fine. And it's right here. Is there any need to have this information spaced out like that? I'm going to go with no. I mean, I think you could have it up there, and I think this is all 18. It's just Let's actually just hop in here and take a look at one of these. Yeah, it's 18. Does it need to be 18? No. I mean, you can make all this 14, and I don't think anybody would notice. I think if anything, if you wanted to have total a little larger so it stood out, I could get that. But, again, it's not something that you absolutely have to have. And if we come over here and look at, ye old Grubhub, and we proceed to check out, down here at the bottom, you see that? It's a little larger. That's a little larger. How big is that? Oddly enough, it is 23. So they've blown that last bit up, and when it's not 23, it's 19. And it appears that what they're probably doing, if you're wondering why is it like 19.9? They're probably using some sort of rem or m structure where it's like, okay, so 16 is the base, so if I say 1.4 rems, it gives me a size. Then it sometimes has decimals in it. I doubt that they are sitting down and using decimals like this. This is a computed style, is what I'm saying to you. But I just wanted to take a second to kind of dive in and look at, okay, how would I pick apart what my competition is doing, so I had a better idea of where I really was in my design. All right, and then again on these other elements, like here, I would just make an instance of each one so that you could quickly switch it out as needed, rather than having one and then going through and picking it apart on the actual page. And then again, why wasn't it working? It was because the ordering was off. Okay. All right. Katie, that's going to do that. And transition back over. All right. So, Katie, I hope that was helpful. I hope that for the rest of you, just watching how we drill down on looking at competitor sites and getting a sense of, how big is the typography over there? What is the standard for the web? Know that the standards for the web are always larger than the standards that you might use on a typical printed page. It's all about screen resolution and how something is displayed on a particular screen. The distance from the screen also matters. Typically speaking, you're holding a piece of paper closer than you're holding the screen. The screen is further away, so that's why the size goes up a bit, but doesn't have to go up to 18. Does it have to go up to 24? That always comes down to, if I'm designing a museum site, I'm going to design that different than a checkout page. It's just, it's all about, what are the things that what are the sites that people associate what I do with, and what are they doing? Because I need my site to either feel similar so that there's not a jarring experience, or I need to separate from the pack so much that it's arresting to people, because there's some sort of great artistic value to doing that. I would steer away from the great artistic values when dealing with a shopping cart. I would go with function. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of the Feedback Loop. I look forward to seeing many of you this afternoon, and for the rest of you, I will chat with you